on the art of the deal.
What?
So, it's a good thing we have a great negotiator in charge now, so it's all on the table. I know that you all will have a lot of questions. I have a couple of comments, and I'm going to reserve the right for 2 quick questions. Dan, I don't know if you know this, but coming to a theater near you, Tom Hanks and HBO have purchased the rights to the whole wooden bedroom furniture story. So, you know, anti-dumping in a way you can explain it to your mom and dad is on its way. Very exciting stuff.
Of which one of my partners,
Sure, John
Greenwald
features prominently.
in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually do recommend the book to you. It's called Factory
representing
Man.
the Chinese.
Yeah, it's written by a journalist, Beth Macy in Roanoke, Virginia. It's called Factory Man, and it's an excellent book. But now, apparently,
It's about the wooden bedroom furniture case.
yeah,
Yes.
whole book.
Sounds like kind of like Amish porn.
For trade geeks, it kind of is.
Some of us are trying to influence who will play the late John Greenwald.
Yeah, I bet. So obviously so much great content from all of you. Thank you very much. I have my first question. I think maybe I'll start with Terry and then whoever else wants to opine. Obviously in the election, trade was such a huge emotional issue. We've not seen it in an election cycle as prominently as in this past one. What would you advise the new administration, forget about a petition brought by private industry, but for any kind of unilateral action, of all the things in the toolbox, what would you advise is the most promising, but also keeping in mind the ramifications for our manufacturers, farmers, and ranchers that are heavily relying on exports?
It's a great question, one that I have thought a fair amount about. My own view has been that the trade policy debate in Washington over the last 4 decades has largely ignored the effect on many Americans, in that you got to a tipping point in this last election where the concerns of people who feel that they've been left behind took a prominent place, and that a lot of the policies that might make sense for the country going forward and for the world going forward are not likely to occur because, without some disruption, right? And so if you're looking at disruption, the question is what things are disruptive enough and yet consistent enough with existing obligations so that you actually get people to reset the dial, right? I would say that if you look at what President Nixon did in 1971 in terms of the balance of payment exception, it lasted a very short period of time, and what it did was it got our trading partners to reset and say, we have a major problem. The United States has a major problem. We need to figure out what we do to get there. If you look at the WTO, I agree with most of what Chuck had to say, but we are looking at a situation that, left to its own devices, we will not get back to a negotiating forum for probably a decade or 2, because we are at an impasse, not only for the reasons that Chuck mentioned, but because of the shift in the power structure and the lack of agreement amongst the majors as to relative responsibility. So absent something like a balance of payment exceptions, absent something like the export tax or the tax reform issue that was raised, the border adjustability issue, something that is eye-popping and that causes people to sit up and say, we need to get together and figure out how we do this in a way that the United States can live with. I think that you will not see meaningful evolution or change that will actually address the underlying issue of how do you get greater reciprocity.
I don't disagree with pretty much anything that Terry just said, but I think we need to keep track of the fact that trade accounts for a fairly small share of job loss, import competition, outsourcing, relative to some of the other determinants like technology. And so we don't want to misdiagnose the problem and say people are out of jobs and having a hard time finding new jobs because of trade. I think if we agree that there is a segment of the population that's always going to have a hard time keeping up with the rapid pace of change, and focus on improving our social safety net, let's shift the focus away from trade and focus on making sure that people have a better avenue to getting reemployed. Trade adjustment assistance doesn't seem to work very well, but maybe we need to really focus our energy on that.
I think it's interesting, and if you haven't taken a look at it, I commend the National Trade Estimate report to all of you. The business community and the agriculture community have done an excellent job in cataloging the problems that are confronting their ability to compete fairly in world markets, country by country. That means that what kind of policies are going to be needed to begin to add tension. Well, first of all, prioritize some of those issues. And the second is what kind of policies can be developed to add enough tension vis-a-vis trying to address this tremendously long catalog of problems the business community has identified and the farm community has identified, to either prompt bilateral negotiations or create enough of a dimension that you actually might get back to the WTO. I did talk a lot about how you have to revitalize the WTO. We have to do that. I happen to agree with Terry. I think it is going to take a long period of time. My exhortation was more, don't give up on the WTO. So I would first start with the National Trade Estimate. Second, I think that a new hard look at how one might use Section 301B. Again, that's all lawyerly talk. Section 301A, pardon me? Yeah, Section 301A deals with where there's been a violation of the agreement because the U.S. has a right there. So put that aside. But the Congress was very prescient, and I think the business community was very prescient when they worked with the Congress on dividing up 301 into these two sections. And 301B is discretionary. And it basically says where the private sector could file a petition or the government could self-initiate or simply just have an investigation of what kind of foreign practices are unreasonable and discriminatory. And again, as I talked about, tension needs to be applied skillfully, not as a protectionist measure. And Section 301B has promise. It needs to be looked at again. It probably needs to be updated in a number of ways, but it has promise as a tool that might be able to begin to provide tension. What you saw after it was passed, before you had the dispute settlement understanding in the WTO, is there was a lot of business interest that used 301B throughout the 80s and early 90s. I had a case where a particular industry had a major problem in Indonesia. I was asked to draft a 301B petition. We drafted it, we gave it to USTR. USTR showed it to the Indonesian, and about 3 months later there was an agreement where the US business, this was a whole sector, got about 60-70% of what they needed. So it was designed to start negotiations. So I think another look at 301B would be constructive.
Great, thanks. We're going to open it up to questions in just 1 second. My last question is a really practical one. I think we've seen with the efforts to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act that there are a lot of unintended consequences, and voters that thought it would be a good thing are now learning that it might not be such a good thing. So from a very practical level on the consumer front, people that have been bemoaning how trade has ruined the country, how should the administration message the ultimate increase in consumer product prices if we go into this retaliatory trade war that could be out there?
Well, I am not in favor of going into a retaliatory trade war. That I don't think is a useful direction. I do think that the bulk of the consumers, you can look at non-farm income from the early 70s through 2015, the average income adjusted for inflation declined. And so Congress in the 70s was smart enough to say unemployed people are unhappy consumers. I would say workers who don't have rising incomes over time, over 4 decades, are not likely to be happy consumers either. So I think that issues that get your trading partners to the table to have meaningful discussions, so that you can change the direction, you can change the balance, you can address the concerns, whether they be the NTE issues that Chuck identified, or others that the administration focuses on, are important, and those may or may not have significant cost to consumers.
And I think that's an interesting question. My feeling is messaging is it's not really the right question, right? I mean, I think the electorate, the people that voted in the new administration they've heard enough messaging, right? They want to see how their daily lives, their jobs, is there a positive impact? And I think for the administration to sort of work towards that goal, it's a lot of hard work. It's, not just speaking to large multinational companies, but, reaching out and working with the states to reach out to small and medium-sized enterprises on the ground who are in those communities, to mayors and to, because the change that's going to really impact consumers and people on the ground is going to happen locally and going to filter down. So more messaging, I don't think, is really going to resolve this issue. I think people are tired of messaging.
Yeah, don't put yourself in a position where you have to message what's happening. Just hypothetically, back the envelope, think of a 10% across the board tariff on all imports. Last year we imported $2.2 trillion worth of goods. 1.1 trillion were intermediate goods and capital equipment purchases of businesses, manufacturers, producers. If we had a 10% tariff, that would be a $110 billion added cost, rough estimate for manufacturers. If foreign governments responded in kind, hit us with a 10% tariff on our exports, which were 1.5 trillion last year, we reduced revenues by approximately 150 billion. So that 150 billion and that reduction in revenues, the 110 billion increase in costs is 260 billion. Last year, manufacturers' profits were 540 billion. So we're talking about approximately half of their profits being cut out. Who is going to be doing the reinvesting? Who's going to be doing the hiring of the people that voted for Trump?
I think, as I think all of us here just said, look, a retaliatory trade war is not in the consumer interest. I don't think it's in business interest, agricultural interest. It's not in the interest of the geopolitical system. But this is what's going to create the crisis. In the past, we have averted trade wars because at a certain point the tension built up enough that people said we need to get to the negotiating table, whether it's bilaterally, regionally, or multilaterally. What we don't know going forward is there going to be the same type of reaction that instead of a trade war, let's get to the negotiating table and be serious about negotiations. That's the uncertainty we're facing. And if the answer is yes, then we're going to have negotiations. Won't solve all remove all the barriers and all the discrimination and unfair treatment, but it should go very far, as other negotiations have. But if the major players do not respond by saying going to the negotiating table, we are looking into a void of then saying, okay, well, if we don't want to, what do we do? And there are choices on both sides in terms of hollowing out or staying ahead. I don't know the answer to that, but we're coming to a head where the sort of the safety valve of negotiations doesn't exist right now. The question is, can we recreate it?